Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the fourth episode of Research Cafe series, exploring my journey and engagement, brought to you by the Innovation and Ideation Club. We are delighted to host Dr. Ashwati Gopal, a talented and driven researcher who has traversed a remarkable journey in the field of health science. From her early days as a doctor student at Hillside Pharmacy College to her current role as a PhD scholar at Kasturba Medical College, Manipal, Dr. Ashwati has consistently demonstrated her passion for research and innovation. Her professional trajectory is marked by diverse experiences, including stints as a clinical research coordinator at Aster Hospital, Bangalore. Ma'am's research pursuits have been shaped by her experience as a research intern at various institutions, including Cheers, Innovating with Technology, and right here at Lee Academy, where she was an intern. Her writing skills have also been honed through her tenure as a content writer. With a strong educational foundation and a wealth of practical experience, Dr. Ashwati is now pursuing her PhD in otorhinolaryngology at Kasturba Medical College, Manipal. Join us as we delve into her personal journey, exploring the twists and turns that have led her to where she is today. And as a part of the Clean Academy community, we are excited to share her story and learn from her experiences. I'm your host, Shambhavi Dubey, and I'm excited to welcome Dr. Ashwati back to the Clean Academy family as our guest of the Research Cafe. Good evening, ma'am. A warm welcome to you.
Thank you, Shantanu. That was a very nice intro, and thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure, ma'am. So let's start with your journey.
Okay.
Okay. So, ma'am, please tell us about your academic and professional journey, which led up to your current role as a PhD research scholar at KMC.
Okay. So as you guys all know, I am a PharmD graduate. So I completed my PharmD, I think, 2000 in the month of January 2023. I think most of you here would also be PharmD, right? If I'm not wrong. Either in terms, in the pharmacy, B.Pharm, M.Pharm, or PharmD. Okay. So I completed, and then I worked for 8 months as a clinical research coordinator in a trial. And then now I am at KMC doing my PhD. So I always wanted to do research, so that is where I am. So this is about my professional background.
All right, ma'am. Okay, so we have come across your LinkedIn banner which says satisfy your soul, not society, which is like your personal philosophy, or do you apply this mindset in your daily life as well?
I mean, like, this is the only, I mean, a life that we get, right? This is the only life that we get. And even in the single life that we get, if we spend time satisfying the society, I feel it is like you're doing injustice to yourself, right? Whether it comes to your personal life or your professional life or whatever. I think it is you have to justify yourself. You have to do justice to yourself, your dreams, your thoughts. So it is always you first, then others. So that is what satisfy your soul, not the society needs. And it also gives you that courage to do new things, and it gives boldness within you. So from that is where that slogan came in also. I think many of you can relate to it. Maybe like small incidents in our life where the people around us would have told us not to do it, but still your heart would say you want it and you would end up doing it. So that courage and boldness, I think that small things is required in life. that will take you to places actually. So that is what my banner is. I mean, LinkedIn this is all about.
Very true, actually.
And it is a mantra that I apply to my life as well, and I try to apply as much as possible.
Yes, ma'am, we are very much inspired by it. Actually, today we are living in the world of people pleasing. So it's very refreshing to see someone who is ready to display their inner compass rather than external experience. expectations ko hi khush karna is not always the motto. So how did your cultural background and upbringing influence your research and academics?
Yeah, that is true. And I think one more thing that I have to tell is family is a very long process. It's almost like, 6 years. Sometimes due to COVID, I did it for almost 6.5 years. So it is like almost a very long process. And many a time, there are chances that people will get demotivated in between, and it will lead to some point of students will be saturated. So in those kind of times, I feel these kind of things will help them a lot. It will give them a little bit of courage, that boost of boldness that is required. So here and then, do things out of the box, do things that are not conventional, like how the society wants. Memories, our memories are going to come with us. So make nice memories and don't follow the rules. Be a rule breaker. That is what I would like to say, in a good way, not in a bad way.
Yes, beautiful. So, if you could go back in time, what advice would you like to give to your younger self who is just starting in your journey?
Okay, I would first of all like to believe that I'm still in my younger self, because I've just started my research and all of that. So if one advice I would like to give in the sense, maybe I would tell her to be more confident and more sensible, and yeah, that's it, I guess. And I would tell her to eat consciously and work out and things. I mean that I can do it even now, but still I would like to tell my younger self that eat healthy, eat consciously, and take care of herself. And when it comes to academics and studying, I stood by what I wanted, and so yeah, this is all I would say. I would actually tell her to be more confident. That was the only thing.
Wonderful.
And you guys should also, adopt it in your lifestyle. Confidence will take you to a lot of places.
That's a great piece of advice, ma'am. I love how you emphasized the importance of confidence, and I really see this generation lacking it a lot. So it's important to be confident actually and eat healthy. So, as your expertise lies in otorhinolaryngology, which is a mouthful word for many of us. So, can you just break it down and explain what this specialty entails?
I think you guys can only tell me. Otorhinolaryngology. It is 4 letters: auto, rhino, laryngo, and then logy. So what is auto? I think you guys can only tell me. Any one of you can unmute, or I'll be keeping a track of the chart also. So you guys can tell me what is auto when it comes to medical terms. Anybody? Or I'll give you a clue. What is rhino? Rhinitis. Does it ring any bells? Yeah, right. Okay, then what is the larynx? And then larynx. I only gave it larynx. So what is larynx? What is it related to? Yeah, so what is larynx related to? Windpipe. Okay. And then in simpler terms? Okay, respiratory system, right. But in simpler terms, in like how we talk to each other like that. It is related to throat, right?
Right.
So nose, throat, auto is ear. So it is ENT. It is just a medical term for ENT.
Okay.
So that is what. So my PhD is in the department of ENT. I'm working on oral cancer. So that is why it is otorhinolaryngology.
Okay.
So we are actually developing a pre-screening tool for oral cancer patients. I mean, to detect oral cancer. So that is.
Okay. So, ma'am, what drew you to pursue a PhD with a focus on otorhinolaryngology? Like, why did you choose this specialization only?
Okay. So I will answer the first question first. Why did I take up a PhD? So I think since my school days, I always wanted to do research. I knew whatever I study, even if I end up in a different stream also, I have to end up in research. That was my ambition since beginning, since I was a child. So that is why like PhD, even if I did any other course also, I think I would have done PhD. I would have definitely research is the end for me. That is what I had decided. So that is what led me to do PhD. And in this department, I mean, in oral cancer, because like because I feel like okay, so may I continue?
Yes, ma'am. Please. Sorry.
Okay, that's okay. So what was I saying? Yeah, I was saying about oral cancer, right? Oral cancer, this particular study attracted me because it is such a basic thing. It is such a simple thing because we are looking into tobacco habits of people, alcohol habits of people, and we are developing a tool to see their to categorize their risk of developing oral cancer. Like especially the part of Karnataka where I am staying, there is a high prevalence of tobacco chewing and everything, which is like very common, very usual. So, using these simple parameters, we are selecting candidates who can be suitable for oral cancer screening. So, it has a direct effect on the society. So, I think if my pre-screening tool that we are developing, if it could be included into government regulations and all of that, it would actually help a lot of people. So that is what drove me, and I think that should be the essence of any research, right? The end of it is actually to help the society, to for the betterment of healthcare system and to for upliftment of the society. So that is what attracted me towards this topic.
Great. This also makes me realize how granted we take our senses for. We should be grateful for whatever we have been provided by the God Himself. So, moving to your role as CRC at Aster Army Hospital, it may have given you a perspective on the inner workings of clinical trial, right? So, could you share some highlights from your experience working on the trial?
Okay. So first of all, clinical research coordinator is somebody who coordinates a trial, who is like the centerpiece of a trial, who is like looking into everything, whatever is happening, is in contact with the sponsor. Sponsor is somebody who is, who is the owner of the drug, who is, like what do you say, who is actually running the trial, engine of the trial. Which the patients attenders in case of pediatric trial, which was mine, and then with other companies with blood samples and all are sent. So for clinical research coordinator is somebody who's coordinating all of this. Okay, so my study was a phase 3 study. I think you guys know what are the trials: phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. So this was like a dose finding study, and it was a double blinded study. So can any one of you tell me what is double-blinded? It is a RCT. All trials are randomized controlled trials only. So and it was a double-blinded study. So can anybody tell me what is double-blinded? What do you mean by double-blinded study?
Can I try?
Yeah, sure. Anybody is fine. You can tell.
So basically, the patient himself and the doctor both are not aware which drug they are giving each other. That way.
Yes. Yeah, that is very true. So the drug that was under study in where I was a CRC. The drug is called etipressib. It is actually a miracle drug for a disease called DMD. That is Duchenne muscular dystrophy. It is a very rare genetic disorder that the male children get. Because mothers are usually the carriers. X chromosomes are usually the carriers. So, and it is a recessive gene, so that is why the male child gets it. So, yeah, and there is no treatment for this disease actually. As of now, there is literally no treatment. There is only this drug that has been approved, and the dosage that to increase the dose and see the efficacy of the drug and also the response of the patients. So it was a 3-arm study, 30 mg, 100 mg, 200 mg.
Okay.
So neither the patients knew what they were getting, and neither our principal investigator, that is our physician, even she didn't know what the children were getting. So, and one more very deadly thing about this disease is the usual lifespan of the kids. It is actually a muscle degradation disease. So the muscle will be in constant degradation, and it will be the proteins will be excreted through kidney, and even on the kidney there is a very there is overload of all these proteins, and there are chances of kidney failure and even heart failure also. So the actual lifespan of the kids is only 20 years, and they would come on wheelchair, like they will use their ambulatory capabilities maybe when they are around 10 to 11 years. So this drug would exceed their lifespan till 40 years, and then they would, they would like their wheelchair time would be extended till 20 years. Means they would have their ambulatory capabilities till 20 years. So that was the major finding of this drug. Okay, so this is what we were studying, and they were all small kids, like 5 year, 6 year kids, like those kind of kids. And it was a weekly infusion, so they used to come for infusion every week, and we used to, I was in the blinded team. Actually, even I didn't know which child was getting which dose. So I was in blinded team, and the unblinded team, they were the ones who were randomizing and saying which child would get which dose, and they were the ones keeping track of their dosage, and I was monitoring their adverse effects and serious adverse effects, and then reporting it to the sponsor, and handling their blood samples, handling their reports, blood reports, and seeing the toxicity of the drug, and those kind of things. It was actually a very good experience because the sponsor of our trial was actually from the US. So in the whole wide world, only few centers were there, less than 10 to 12 centers. And since this was a miracle drug, I was very fortunate to be a part of this trial and see the improvement in the children. And when 5, 6, and we used to have this physiotherapy things, where physiotherapy activities, wherein we would monitor the like betterment of the child, like are they able to run, are they able to walk. So week by week, when you see that the children are doing, that thing, that satisfaction, that thing when you see it in your own eyes that this drug is doing, it actually it was very rewarding, and it was a good experience, and it taught me a lot of things about workplace, how to handle people. Actually, the main thing when you're working that you have to learn is to handle people. So that is the thing that I've learned from this, and I got really very wonderful friends, and it was overall a very wonderful experience in many ways actually. So that was about my time in master.
That's really interesting to know, ma'am. And I think this drug is going to be it holds a great potential in future, and it's going to change lives. We can sense that potential आपकी बातों से. So next moving.
Yeah, I hope so.
Your internship and clerkship at PGS Hospital, it offered you opportunity to explore various medical specialties across different departments like general medicine, pediatrics, and gynecology. So how did it help you develop your clinical skills and knowledge?
Yeah. My internship was, I think, as everybody can say, it was like it was part of academics. It was like normal thing. And one thing I would like to say is our hospital. I don't know how many of you are from Bangalore here. If you're from Bangalore, if you would have heard of BGS Hospital, you know that it is in an isolated location and it is surrounded by factories. So many patients who would come there would be laborers, and mainly they would come with respiratory disorders or seasonal disorders, or with diabetic foot, or these were the normal patterns of patients we used to see. So what we did was, because and there because it is a very common diseases. So we wanted to do something out of the box. Like we did have ward rounds, we did have, ADR reporting that this and all, like as usual as part of the curriculum. So we wanted to do prescription audit also because we saw more irrational prescription of antibiotics and all that, and even of analgesics. That was my thesis actually. So we wanted to do something like we wanted to do a prescription audit, and we did that in many departments, even in dermatology, even in ENT. So in all those kind of small departments where it is not that much regulated, which is considered as like the smaller, like not that much major department. So we did it there, and we also developed a format, a template for prescription that is even now being so that we did. And people who are and students who are doing internship, what I would like to tell them is going to ward room, seeing patients. I think all of you would do it. It is part of your curriculum. But what matters is what you do apart from this. So find out the things that your hospital is lacking in, where you can fill in the shoes. Because that is what Foundry is all about, right? What the physicians and other healthcare workers are able to do, that is where we are going to fill in, right? So find out such gaps and try to see how you can do it, or try to come up with few project ideas. See the majority of the cases in your hospital and try to come up with a idea. Start conducting small studies, maybe 2 months long study, 3 months long study, something like that, which will actually enhance your knowledge, and it will actually make you a better clinical pharmacist if you want to go in that path. If not, also it will definitely help you in understanding things, and it will help you in your professional journey. So, and it will help you understand what foundries are actually, because if I think majority of them, if we ask what is foundry, what is the actual role of foundries, I think most of them first will be blank. Later they'll start putting up some stories. So if you start engaging yourself in these kind of activities, I think it will help you understand your importance. So that is what I would like to advise to all final year families. Understand your hospital, understand the gaps, and try how can you fill it. Just that little bit of effort, I think the final intern should be doing.
Great suggestion, ma'am. We'll definitely consider that. So research is often full of surprises, and it may come up with very unexpected discoveries. So any unexpected discovery you came across, or any memorable experience from your journey as a researcher that you would like to share?
I mean, I'm still very young in this research. It is just 6 months into it. So nothing as significant, but I'd like to tell this example from my work experience as a CRC. I had this child who was, I think, around 8 years old, and he was on the verge of losing his ambulatory capabilities. Now that I'm out of the trial, I know which child is getting which dose, but that time I was not aware of it. So this child, he was actually getting the highest dose. Okay. So what we saw is he was actually very different from the rest of the children because his activities were deteriorating. His muscular capabilities, like before we have this 100-meter walk test. Okay, so no, we have this. I'm sorry, we have this 300-meter walk test, and before he used to complete it in 20 minutes, 25 minutes, but later it increased it till 40 minutes. So we didn't know what the reason was. So, and then, from the reports and all of these things, we found out that his potassium levels were low. He had hyperkalemia. So, we actually, in the study protocol, I think, actually, as a CRC, seeing from a clinical pharmacist perspective, it will help you a lot. Because what happened was when I saw that the patient had hyperkalemia, my first instinct was to go and check the study protocol to see what are their suggestions, what is the sponsor suggestions to manage it. But unfortunately, they had not given any suggestions, and there was no mention of hyperkalemia at all. And when I took this to my PI, we suddenly did an ECG, and we saw that the child's heart was actually in danger. So, and then we treated him with appropriate therapies. And from after that, his 1 week dose of etiquette was held, and from the next week, and after that, the dose continued. And after 1 month or so, we saw a very good improvement in his activities, in his physiotherapy activities, and all. He could stand on his toes, he could jump, and then his walking also improved. He could walk in maybe 15 minutes, 18 minutes, he could complete a distance of 300 meters. So this thing was actually very good. This was actually found out by me and my colleague together. He is also a family. So we both found this and we took it to our PI, and like the further treatment, everything happened, and we are really happy that now he is responding really well. In fact, he has become more naughty now. So I think this was one very like eye-opening thing. I was very thankful that I could see from a clinical pharmacist perspective and find out the thing.
That was
So
very
this
interesting.
was the thing that we were missing.
That was very wholesome as well. All of your talks are making me so happy that we are having this conversation. So, ma'am, as you share your experiences, I notice that you have a very beautiful balance of science and art in your life. So, your hobbies, including mandala art, are a proof of your creativity. So, can you walk us through the process when you're creating your art? What inspires you? What inspires your design, and what do you hope others to take away from it?
Actually, if you see my handwriting and all, no, I think half of you would get scared because I have such a bad handwriting. So I just, simply used to scribble and things. So that is how I learned shading and all of those things. So, oh, you guys have, okay, thank you. That is so sweet of you guys. So just like, scribbling and doing something with pen, paper, somehow I have time, I just do it. So nothing special about it. It is just like I when I have time, I whenever I get bored, whenever I feel like letting out myself, I just do it. It's like a therapy. It helps me. It is just like a therapy. That's all I would like to say.
As we have all seen, that it's very stunning, and the patterns and the colors just show how creative you are. And it's very nice to know that you take it as a therapy. Of course, it would like help you to relax and recharge yourself. So, ma'am, as we have discussed your artistic side as well, I'm curious to know about your scientific pursuits. So, your family project, it focused on analgesic use and pain assessment in a tertiary care hospital. So, could you tell us how you selected this project topic and what was your experience? Any key findings from it?
Okay, so like I said, the majority of the patients who came to my hospital were, with seasonal disorders or with diabetic foot or actually many accident cases. So for accident cases and all, and many chronic illness also like rheumatoid arthritis, those kind of patients used to come, and post-op patients surgical patients used to come, for amputation, many even childbirth cases wherein post-op care is very much necessary. So these, because we couldn't find any, actually, in the beginning, I think this is the mistake that everybody does. So everybody would be like, let me look into something that nobody has looked into, maybe some rare issue, maybe some very rare phenomenon or something. But many a times, no, you miss looking at the most common thing. I think a different perspective to it would give you great results. So that is what led us to this project. So we saw that analgesics were used a lot, and many at times, when PG interns and all are prescribing, many a times even a proton pump inhibitor was not prescribed. Even if it was prescribed for 3 times a day. So which we felt was irrational. Once a day is more than sufficient, and patients didn't know whether when to take it, when not to take it. And as I said, they were all laborers. They were all like not that much educated, right? So we thought, why don't we take up this project? It will be like we are helping the patients also. We are counseling them as well. And we are also, telling the, like, inside our hospital, we are creating this environment of rational use of analgesics. So that is why we took up this topic, and we did it. And we also gave pamphlets to few patients, and we also told them how to take the medicine. It is like a very simple thing. It is just a proton pump inhibitor, pantoprazole, or simple tramadol, diclofenac, and that's it. But still, that still could make a huge difference in a patient's life where they're undergoing pain. So I think that is what. Like I said, the end uh, product of any of your projects should be eventually to help the people, to help the society. That is what all of a healthcare professional's agenda should be. So in that way, keeping that in mind, I think we did this project.
That's really great. So many things to learn from you, ma'am. And definitely we will be focusing on that. That should be our end result, to help patients and to help people. So, ma'am, you've also explored the role of systemic inflammatory biomarkers in predicting the response to immunotherapy through your short-term research project, which was funded by RGUHS. So, how did you secure this opportunity, and what specific criteria did you have to meet to be eligible for this grant?
Okay, so here I would like to talk about two things. First one is the RGHS grants, and second one is about my study at study that I did. So first, I would like to know how many of you are here from RGHS under RGHS University. How many of you are here? Okay, one. Okay, this is few of them are raising their hands too. Okay, okay, that's great. So if you're from RGHS, no. Okay, among those who told that they are from RGHS, how many of you have heard about RGHS UG research grants? If anybody has tried to apply, if anybody, um, you know, has had a chance to go through the website and all. Okay, okay, one student has called, it's not yet. Okay. Okay, that's nice. So RGHS every year it gives around please repeat about the grant. It is RGHS UG research grants, undergraduate research grants. So every year it gives around 15,000 for students who are interested to submit a proposal to RGHS. They will open applications and you have to submit your proposals, and then they will shortlist the candidates. They have a scoring system. So and then they will shortlist the candidates and they will give the required amount of grants. So I think everybody in RGHS is doing fine. I think this is a very good opportunity for you guys. So I think you guys should check the website and take it up. But one catch is that it is only applicable till next year of Hampi. I would suggest that catch hold of your juniors and put your name along with their name if you find anybody interested, and start working on the projects, because you're getting grants, and working on a granted project when you are a student is actually a very great thing. Okay, so I would suggest you guys to look into the RGHS website and take up this opportunity. So when I was in my fourth year PharmD, I applied and fortunately I got it. So I conducted the study at HCG Hospital. There, I had a wonderful guide. I mean, like, I'm very, very fortunate to have met him. He is Dr. Rishi. He also completed his PharmD, and now he is studying translational research in oncology in Manchester. So he was like the ultimate guru. Like, I mean, I was very fortunate to find him, and he helped me do this project. And that is when I learned a little bit about clinical trials from him. And then the drug I was working on was actually a PD-1 and PD-L1 inhibitor. I don't know if you guys have learned this. I mean, heard about it. It is a new class of drug. It is actually an anti-cancer drug. So what happens is every normal cell, it has it has these receptors called PD-1 receptors. So, and every T cell, this is like a defense mechanism. So whenever a T cell comes across a normal cell, it sees, okay, this has a PD-1 receptor, so I should not attack it. It is a recognition system. It recognizes normal cells. So what these cancer cells do is they are obviously over smart and they mimic the normal cells. So they start, having this PD-1 receptors around them, and T cells are unfortunately not able to recognize it and destroy it. So that is where this anti-PD PD-1, PD-L1 drugs come into action, and they block these receptors on the cancer cells so the T cell can identify them and kill them. So the drugs approved are pembrolizumab and nivolumab as of now for oral cancer, lung cancer, and hepatocellular carcinoma. So when I was doing during COVID time, I think around 2020 or so, that time only pembrolizumab and nivolumab were approved only for lung cancer and hepatic cell carcinoma. So my study was that, and it is like, you know, cancer is also very subjective to many patients. Cancer tumor, no, it is not same for all the patients. So only few patients were eligible for this therapy who had PD-1 receptors in their tumor cells. And to find out this, what we used to do was we used to do a histopathological examination, that is biopsy, to see if they have the receptors or not. Although they have the receptors, because this drug is highly cytotoxic drug, it had many people used to have very poor. Was the only option after the treatment. After that, you would see if tumor has shrunk or if the tumor has increased in size. But getting a PET CT done more often, it is like a financial burden to the patient as well, and even to the even to the caretaker. And it is like PET CT is usually not recommended to be taken that often also, right? So getting a PET CT scan is actually it's not recommended. So we had to find an alternative way to see how patients are responding to this therapy. So that is where we came across simple blood biomarkers like the amount of neutrophil in your blood, lymphocyte in your blood. That would tell you a lot about the prognosis, how the patient is doing. So we came up with these formulas like NLR and then ELR, eosinophilus to lymphocyte ratios. So these kind of simple ratios, and we would compare it with every dosage of the drug, every chemotherapeutic cycle of the patients. And then we would see how well the patient is doing, and we would consider whether we have to continue the medicine or we have to take any, if we have to withdraw the medicine also. So that was my study all about, and it was actually one of a kind study, and it was most of the credit goes to my guide. So, and then I got a chance also to present this study in an international conference, but unfortunately due to COVID, I didn't get my visa and I couldn't go there. So that is what this project is all about. And this is where, my research in cancer also, my interest for research in cancer also rooted. I think it is more than the study. It is because I could connect with such an amazing sir, and his passion for research in cancer. I think somewhere he transferred it to me also. So, and then it grew up in me. So that is how it is.
Very insightful, ma'am. Thank you for sharing your experience with us. So you have already told us about the most rewarding aspect of your journey. So once again, I would like you to look back at your journey from conducting research to presenting your findings and publishing papers, which has been the most rewarding aspect for you.
Most rewarding aspect, I would say actually there is no single most rewarding aspect. It is like a chain reaction. One thing will lead to another, and it is like a ladder. You climb, climb, climb slowly, and then you see the beautiful view. So I think I'm still in the step of climbing the ladder and getting things done. So I think every step is rewarding. It is just the way you see it, right? So it is like every step you have to appreciate the small things in your life and be positive. So every step is rewarding. Even like even maybe writing a protocol, that itself is like sometimes you surprise yourself. Sometimes you're like, did this thing even come from my head? So it is like, yeah, small things are rewarding. I think that is what you have to find happiness in small things.
It's really beautiful to see how you have embraced the entire process, and so nice to see that you have found joy in each aspect, and that is what really counts. So ma'am, any piece of advice which you would like to give early career researchers who are looking to start their own research project?
Okay. I mean, the right balance between your passion and ambition. At this stage, no, after founding, I think you guys have received a lot of uncertainty, what to do, where to go. What I would suggest is first be clear what you don't want to do. I think that will tell you a lot, that will open a lot of doors for you. For example, I knew very sure that I didn't want to get into a 9 to 5 job. That was very clear for me. Okay. So like that, you guys decide what you do not want to do. So, and then you will start understanding where your path lies, where your passion is, and even just although you get the job of your dreams, don't settle there. Be ambitious. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, ma'am, I can see.
So, what I would like to suggest is, even if you guys get your dream job, don't just settle for it. You still have a lot of, you still are very young. You have just gotten into your, just started your professional journey. So be ambitious. Try to do more. Try to connect with more people in your field. Try to gain experience. Try to gain expertise and grow with it. For example, even for these projects and all, don't settle with just publication. Just go present it somewhere, meet new people, try to find similar researchers in your, try to understand it. Go on, like grow yourself. I think grow yourself. Even if that's what you like to say.
Ma'am, your voice is breaking.
Please tell me.
Now it's fine.
Oh, my voice was breaking. Where did you guys understand? I mean, could you understand what I was trying to say?
Yes, we did understand. That's a very valuable piece of advice, and we'll keep that in mind. So, ma'am, as we continue our conversation, I'd also like to shift our focus on the importance of collaboration. So I would love to explore how you actively collaborate or engage with scientific communities or professional organizations to stay updated about the recent advancements.
Just be ambitious enough to find people, and you will find people in collaborators, and you just have to build your own network.
Okay. So, ma'am, you also came to know that you were an intern at Climate Research Solutions, and at the completion of the internship, you have worked as a research intern and content writer, clinical research coordinator at Aster Hospital, PhD scholar at KMC, and so much more. So the question is, what secret serum did Ajit sir provide you with that made you pursue these many achievements?
Actually, I think I met Sir when I was still a student, when I was like, in third year, fourth year, like that. So I think he has had a major role in shaping me from there. So I met him when I was like just like, studying one day before the exam and passing it. So I was at that stage. So Sir, listening to Sir's talks and, all his classes, he actually taught me what pharmacy is, what clinical pharmacy is, and you know, it developed my interest also. He taught me a lot of things. And even when I came to KMC, I actually had nobody here when I first came here. So Sir helped me with many of things, with admission process and even with finding a home to stay. So I think Sir has been there for me at various stages. And if I need any kind of professional advice, or even any kind of apart from professional advice, any kind of personal advice too, I think I would definitely go to Sir. And he is that a very warm and welcoming person. So he has been kind enough to I mean even answer my stupid doubts, and take me. I mean, I think he has had a he has played a huge role for what I have been today. And he has, even in the future also, even after my PhD, after that, also, I think I would definitely stay in touch with Sir. And I think there is still a long way to go still. So I think Sir has had a huge impact in my life.
Actually, yes, Ajit sir does provide us all with a healthy dose of encouragement and mentorship here and there every
Yeah.
time. But in all seriousness, ma'am, your journey from Climate to achieving these many milestones is truly inspiring for all of us interns. So, what I would love to know is what's the most valuable lesson or skill that you have learned during your internship period at Climate? That is from June 2021 to January 2022, I suppose. So, any piece of advice to them, to the interns here?
First, what I have learned is actually I learned a lot of things. I was just like, only those subjects, six subjects that we had. I thought that is only PharmD is all about. But it is not just about that. Because PharmD is just still in its, infant stages in India. I think we as PharmD students have to put in a lot of effort and try to find opportunities. So that is what Sir taught me. Sir taught me how to put efforts in the right place to find the right opportunities. So that Sir taught me, and I think even you guys have a good network among yourselves. Keep a note of what one person, what each of you are doing, and try to connect with each other and try to understand what is happening in and around you. Because there are nowadays many people are taking up this board certified exams, and they're doing very well in their lives, right? So such new opportunities are coming. Keep yourself open to it. Keep yourself updated all the time. So through this community of pre-med interns, I think that is what I would suggest you guys to do. Keep yourself well networked and try to understand what all opportunities are still coming up for farmers.
Thank you so much, ma'am. We'll definitely keep that in mind. So, as we wrap up our conversation, any three piece of advice which you would like to give to someone who wants to make a difference in healthcare and research, like you have made?
Okay, I mean, I'm still, I don't know if I have made yet. I'm still like, trying my best. But three advices is, first thing is, like I said, the right balance of passion and ambition. So that is very important. Second is always believe in yourself, no matter what. Have confidence. And third thing is, at this stage when you're clearing family, no, don't ever compare yourself with anybody. Don't be like, my friend, as soon as he finished family, he got, so and so package for job. Why am I still here? This friend got this job, that friend got that job. Don't ever compare. Everybody's journey is very unique. I'll tell you one example. I had this friend from Northeast. He was my classmate. All of us got placed, all of us, were doing something. And although he was actually very well good in his academics, unfortunately, he couldn't get a job anywhere. We do not know what was the reason. So he was like very frustrated. And then he was like, just let it go. I'll focus on myself. I will start a startup. So he started this something related to developing an app for healthcare people. And the app grew so much. He actually met the CM of the state of Meghalaya. So everybody's journey is different. So maybe what is not happening right now for you, maybe there's a reason behind it, right? So everybody's train, everybody's timeline is different. So just believe in that and don't compare yourself. Don't demotivate yourself. Having confidence and believing in yourself are the most important things. So these three things I would like to say: passion and ambition, always believe in yourself and have confidence, and do not compare. Okay, it became four now. So this is what I would like to say.
A perfect summary of our today's conversation. Thank you so much, ma'am. So before we conclude today's episode, I would like to open the floor for questions. So if you guys have any questions, you may drop it in the chat box or you may unmute yourselves to ask. There's one question by Anirudh already. He asked, how many times in a year grant can be applied if possible? Please be brief about the process and do the needful.
Sorry, I didn't get you. What process?
How many times in a year grant can be applied? If possible, please be brief about the process and do the needful. About grants.
Okay. So it is yearly once. They call for the grants. I think around the month of December, January, something like that. You can start looking from November only. So they will open applications and then you can apply. It is yearly once, and the duration for the project is 3 months. So within 3 months you have to complete your project and then you have to submit the report. So that is what. So every year they'll open it. So you guys can keep that.
I'm giving vitamin to specific disease from human trials.
Okay, I think this is a very practical question. This is a specific disease. Okay, vitamin and clinical trials, right? It depends on the type of vitamin. Actually, clinical trials, many a times it could be phase 4 trials also when brands, when different brands, they are taking up the same drug and marketing it, so that then those trials also happen. So maybe I think so those kind of trials also exist. But if it is a new vitamin, okay, I think they're asking for vitamin D. So I think during FDA upload of vitamin D and all those, I think trials would have definitely happened. So yeah, for any kind of drug, even smallest of the smallest drug also, there are clinical trials. So even vitamins comes under drugs also. I think.
Ma'am, there's another question. Ma'am, in today's time, is PhD worth it?
Yeah, I would like to say is PhD is evergreen. It is worth all the time. Even now, even in the future, because research is ever booming, right? Research is about tomorrow. It's not about today. Research is something you're contributing for tomorrow's for betterment of the public in the future. So that growth will always be there. So PhD is always evergreen. And like I said, and it depends upon where you want to save your report.
Okay. Ma'am, there's also another question. How do you see the growth of pharma field and PharmD scope in coming years?
I think PharmD is becoming more familiar now, and it is becoming more widely accepted. Before, people used to, if anybody says PharmD, they used to be like, oh, what is this B-Pharm or something? So PharmD is, and the role of, and many corporate hospitals, they actually the basic requirement for them is to have a clinical pharmacist. So I think the scope is good. It is growing. Again, like I said, have network, have connections. Try to find opportunities which would be in your favor. So if you look for it, there are many opportunities.
Ma'am, there's another question. Can you tell some research grant available now? I'm family intern. The person was asking.
Okay. So for family interns, I think if you're in, I know only about RCHS grant, so that you can apply. Other than that, it depends on your proposal. If you have a good proposal, then you can even try for ICMR grants. If your guide is okay with it, if you have a good guide and if they are okay with it, you can even go ahead with ICMR grants. As an intern, you can't do anything on your own. As a student, you can't apply for any grant. You need to have a guide. Even for RJHS, you need to have a guide. So if you have a good bit, then you can go for ICMR, CSIR, and many private grants are also there. You can just Google it and you can find suitable grants.
Okay. No more questions, guys? Okay, ma'am. So shall we proceed with vote of thanks?
Yeah, you guys can proceed. And thank you a lot. It was a very good session. Thank you for the questions. And thank you to the host. Thank you, Shambhavi. You were such a delight to talk to.
Thank you, ma'am. It's my pleasure. So, starting with the vote of thanks. Dear ma'am, we would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude for joining us on the episode 4 of Research Cafe. Your inspiring personal journey, valuable insights, and passion for research have left a lasting impact on our audience, and your willingness to share your experience and advices have been incredibly enriching for all of us. Also, thank you to Cleveland Academy for providing a platform for meaningful conversation like this one. And to our audience, thank you for being an integral part of our episode. Thank you once again, ma'am, for your time, wisdom, and inspiration. You are an exceptional role model and mentor to all of us. And we wish you continued success in your research journey. Until next time, thank you everyone for joining us on the Research Cafe series.
Thank you, guys. And I would like to wish everybody also success. And I hope everybody, succeeds in their life and gets whatever they're dreaming for. So all the best to you also, guys. And hope to see you guys soon. I can't wait to see what you guys will do.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much.